He said, "I forgot what warmth feels like," she whispered. "Then let me teach you again." Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. On a quiet, rainy afternoon, Elias Hart, a former military doctor, stood by the fogged window of his small lake house. The sound of the rain hitting the glass was soft, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. But to him, it felt distant, cold, hollow. He had lived alone for 5 years, ever since he left the field hospital and never went back. People called him the man who forgot how to feel. Maybe they were right. Inside his house, everything was neat but lifeless. The fireplace was clean, untouched, as if warmth itself had been banned. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and wet wood. He had grown used to silence, to the kind of quiet that hums louder than any noise. His only visitor was Lena Moore, a young nurse from the nearby clinic who came once a week to check on his hand injury, an old shrapnel wound that refused to heal completely. That day, when she knocked on his door, the rain was falling harder. Elias hesitated before opening it. Her voice came from outside, calm but slightly breathless. "Dr. Hart, I am here to change your dressing. May I come in?" He could have said no. He almost did. But something in her tone, steady, patient, not demanding, made him step aside. "You can stay until the rain stops," he said quietly. Lena entered, shaking the raindrops off her coat. Her presence changed the room in an instant. The air felt lighter, warmer, like a hint of spring sneaking into winter. She placed her medical bag on the table, her eyes scanning the dim space. "You never light your fireplace, do you?" she asked softly. Elias gave a faint smile. "No need. The fire burns out too quickly." She said nothing, just nodded, then rolled up his sleeve gently to tend to his wound. Her hands were careful, professional, but there was something else in her touch, something human, something quiet and kind. For the first time in years, Elias felt aware of the warmth of another person's skin. It startled him. He drew a slow breath, pretending not to notice. "You have been doing better," Lena said, her voice breaking the silence. "Your hand is healing." "Hands heal faster than hearts," he muttered without thinking. The words escaped before he could stop them. Lena looked up. Her gaze lingered on him for a moment, not out of pity, but understanding. "Some wounds just take longer," she said. For a second, neither of them moved. The rain kept tapping against the window like a whisper. The smell of antiseptic mixed with the faint scent of her peppermint tea from the thermos she carried. She poured him a cup without asking. He almost refused, but the warmth of the steam rising between them made him stay quiet. He took a sip. It was sharp, sweet, alive. A simple act, but it felt like something breaking open inside him, a memory, a pulse, a warmth he had forgotten. As the rain continued outside, Lena packed her things but left one item on the chair by the door, a small gray scarf. "You can keep it until next time," she said with a small smile. He watched her leave, the scarf in his hands, still carrying her scent and her warmth. When the door closed, the silence returned, but this time, it felt different, less empty. For the first time in years, Elias looked at the fireplace and wondered, maybe it was time to light it again. The next morning, the rain had stopped, but the air still carried that quiet chill that lingers after a long storm. Elias woke earlier than usual. The lake outside was calm again, covered by a thin mist that made everything look like it belonged to a dream. On the chair near the door, the gray scarf still rested where Lena had left it. He touched it lightly. It was soft and still faintly warm. He told himself he would return it when she came back for her next visit. But a part of him hoped she would forget, just so she would have a reason to come by sooner. For the first time in months, Elias made coffee, not just for himself, but for someone else. He poured 2 cups, out of habit or maybe out of hope, then smiled at the thought. It felt foolish, but also strangely comforting. Days passed quietly. The wound on his hand had nearly healed, yet he found himself missing her presence more than he expected. The way she moved without breaking the silence, the sound of her soft voice when she spoke about ordinary things, those memories stayed with him like music that refuses to fade. When Friday came, Lena returned. The knock on the door was gentle but certain. Elias opened it before she could call his name. She looked surprised, almost amused. "You remembered my day," she said, stepping inside. He nodded, pretending to be casual. "I keep a good schedule." She smiled. "You mean you missed having someone to argue with about tea and coffee?" He almost laughed, but stopped himself halfway. "Maybe," he said, handing her the gray scarf. "You left this." Lena took it, her fingers brushing his for a brief moment. The touch was light, almost accidental, but it stayed with both of them longer than it should have. "Thank you," she said, "though I have a feeling it kept you company." He looked away, embarrassed by how true that sounded. She placed her bag on the table and began to prepare the supplies. As she worked, Elias noticed the sunlight spilling through the window, turning the room a soft gold. Dust floated in the air like tiny stars. It was the first time he had seen his house look alive. While she changed the bandage, Lena asked quietly, "How have you been sleeping?" He hesitated. "Better," he said. Then after a pause, "The silence does not feel so heavy anymore." She nodded, as if she understood something deeper behind his words. "Silence can be good," she said, "as long as it is shared." Her answer lingered between them like a note of music hanging in the air. Elias watched her hands work with steady precision, and for a moment he remembered what it felt like to be part of something larger than himself: trust, care, connection. When she finished, she poured 2 cups of tea from her thermos and handed one to him. The scent of ginger and honey filled the room. "You remembered my favorite," he said. "I noticed you did not finish it last time," she replied, "so I made it stronger." He took a sip. It was warmer, sharper, alive. He could almost feel it spreading through him, reaching the parts of his chest that had been cold for years. As they sat in the quiet room, Lena glanced toward the fireplace. "Do you ever use it?" "Not since—" He stopped, the words catching in his throat. "Not since before the hospital closed." "You should," she said softly. "The fire changes everything. It makes even loneliness look different." He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Maybe next time. When she stood to leave, the sun had already begun to set behind the lake. The light turned amber, painting her face with warmth. "I will see you next week, Dr. Hart," she said. He followed her to the door. "Elias," he corrected gently. "You can just call me Elias." She smiled, the kind of smile that reached her eyes. "All right, Elias." The sound of his name in her voice felt like a quiet promise. After she left, he stayed by the door, listening to the fading sound of her footsteps on the gravel path. The house fell silent again, but this time, the silence did not feel empty. It felt expectant, alive, like something was beginning to change. He turned toward the fireplace. The wood was still stacked neatly inside, untouched. For a long moment, he stood there, watching the gray ash of years gone by. Then, almost without thinking, he reached for the matches. The first spark flared, small but bright. The flame caught, danced, and then grew, filling the room with a soft, trembling light. Elias sat back and watched the fire reflect in the window, warm against the quiet world outside. For the first time in 5 years, the house no longer felt like a shelter, it felt like a home. The next few days slipped by in a rhythm Elias had almost forgotten how to live. Mornings were no longer heavy, they came quietly, with the smell of rain on pine and the faint warmth that lingered in the corners of his home. The fireplace burned every evening now. He did not light it out of habit or cold. He lit it because it reminded him that warmth could return, even to a man who once believed it was gone for good. Each night he found himself thinking of Lena, her calm presence, her steady hands, the way her eyes carried light even when the world outside looked gray. It surprised him how easily her voice replayed in his head. He tried to convince himself that it was only gratitude. But gratitude did not make a man wait for a sound that never came. On Thursday, a soft knock echoed through the wooden door earlier than usual. Elias opened it and found Lena standing there, her cheeks pink from the cold, her scarf pulled tight. "You are early," he said, a hint of surprise in his tone. "I was nearby," she replied with a small smile, "and I thought I would check on your hand. I did not want to wait until tomorrow." Elias stepped aside without hesitation. The house felt brighter as soon as she entered. The fire was already burning, its glow spilling across the floor like melted gold. She noticed immediately. "You lit it," she said softly. "I did," he answered. "You were right. The fire changes everything." She smiled, setting down her bag. Then I am glad I said it. Lena began preparing the fresh bandage, but her movements slowed when she saw his hand. The skin had healed almost completely, a faint pink line where the scar used to be. It looks good, she said. You may not need the dressing much longer. He nodded. Strange, is it not? The body heals faster when the heart starts to believe it can. Her eyes met his for a second, something unspoken passing between them. She looked away first, focusing on her work. You should still be careful, she murmured. As she wrapped the final layer, Elias noticed how close she stood, close enough for him to smell the faint scent of soap and mint. The air between them felt delicate, like a thread stretched too tight. When she finished, Lena closed her bag but did not move right away. Instead, she looked toward the window where the rain had started again. The light outside was fading, the lake turning silver under the clouds. It will be dark soon, she said. You can stay until it stops, Elias offered, echoing his own words from the first day they met. Lena looked at him, surprised, then nodded. All right, just until the rain slows down. They sat near the fire, each holding a cup of tea. The silence between them was no longer empty. It was full, alive, like the space between two notes in a song. Elias watched the reflection of the flames in her eyes. You must see many patients, he said quietly. How do you keep caring for people without losing yourself? Lena thought for a moment before answering. You do lose a little piece of yourself each time, she said. But sometimes, the people you help give a piece back. It is never the same, but it is enough. Her words settled deep inside him. Do you think that is what healing really means? He asked. She looked into the fire. Maybe. Healing is not forgetting. It is remembering without pain. Elias turned his gaze toward the flames. The light danced across his face, revealing both the age and the tenderness time had carved into him. Then I suppose I am learning, he said. The rain grew louder against the windows, but neither of them moved. The fire crackled softly. At one point, Lena reached forward to add a piece of wood. Her sleeve brushed against his arm, and for the first time, he did not pull away. Instead, he let the warmth stay. When she noticed, she did not apologize or move back. She simply kept her hand near his for a moment longer than necessary. It was not bold or romantic. It was quiet, natural, like something that had always been meant to happen. After a long pause, she whispered, You seem different lately. Lighter. Elias smiled faintly. Maybe I finally remembered what warmth feels like. Lena's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. Then my job here is done. Or maybe it is just beginning, he said softly. Her eyes lifted to his, and for a moment, the air between them seemed to hold its breath. The fire popped, a spark shooting upward before fading into the air. Outside, the rain eased into a gentle drizzle. Lena stood slowly, slipping on her coat. It looks like it has stopped, she said. Elias rose with her, walking her to the door. The air that came in was cool, fresh, carrying the scent of wet earth and pine. She turned to face him one last time. Until next time, Elias, she said. He nodded, his voice quiet. Next time. When she left, the door closed softly behind her. Elias stood there for a long moment, listening to the whisper of the fire. The warmth in the room lingered even after she was gone, like her presence had become part of the air itself. He sat back down, staring into the flames. He no longer saw a wound when he looked at his hand. He saw proof that even what is broken can become whole again if you let someone in. The week that followed carried a quiet rhythm. Each morning, Elias walked along the lake, his boots pressing softly into the damp earth. The trees were turning gold, the air smelled of pine and smoke, and for the first time in years, he noticed how the world changed colors when the season shifted. Every evening, he returned home to light the fireplace, and in that flicker of orange, he always thought of Lena. She had not visited since the night of the rain, and though she had promised to return, the days stretched longer than they should have. He told himself she was simply busy, that the clinic demanded her time. But the silence that filled his house felt different now, no longer comforting, only empty. On the 5th day, Elias decided to go into town, something he had avoided for years. The drive along the winding road felt unfamiliar, almost like traveling through a memory he had tried to forget. He parked near the small clinic where Lena worked. The building was simple, white walls, a blue sign faded by the Sunday. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and coffee. A young receptionist looked up as he entered. "Good afternoon, sir. Do you have an appointment?" "No," Elias said. "I was hoping to speak with Nurse Lena more." The receptionist hesitated, glancing at the schedule. "She is not here today. She had to take a few days off." "Is she all right?" Elias asked before he could stop himself. "I believe so," the woman replied kindly. "She mentioned something about family matters." He thanked her and left, but worry followed him all the way home. That night, he did not light the fireplace. The house felt colder than it had in months. He sat in the chair by the window, the gray scarf draped across his lap, and listened to the wind move through the trees. For the first time, he wished someone else were there to tell him it would be fine. 3 days later, just before dawn, a knock came at the door. Elias opened it to find Lena standing there, soaked to the bone, her eyes tired but steady. She tried to smile, but it trembled. "I am sorry," she said. "I did not mean to worry you." He stepped aside quickly. "Come in. You are freezing." She entered, her hands shaking as she removed her coat. Her clothes were damp, her hair clung to her face. Without thinking, Elias grabbed a blanket from the chair and wrapped it around her shoulders. "What happened?" he asked. She sat near the fire, which he hurried to light. "My father," she said quietly. "He had a heart attack 2 nights ago. He is stable now, but it was a lot." Elias nodded slowly, understanding the exhaustion in her voice. "You should have called. You did not have to face that alone." "I am used to being the one who helps," she said, "not the one who needs it." Her words struck him deeply, because they sounded like his own reflection. He poured her a cup of tea, his hands steady this time. "You once told me healing is remembering without pain," he said. "But maybe healing also means letting someone hold the weight with you." Lena looked at him for a long moment, her eyes shimmering in the firelight. "It feels strange to let someone care for me," she admitted. "I am not used to it." He smiled faintly. "Then maybe I will teach you again." The silence that followed was warm, filled with the soft hiss of the burning wood and the sound of rain returning outside. She sipped the tea slowly, her breathing evening out, the tension in her shoulders easing. After a while, she spoke again, her voice quieter now. "I almost did not come tonight," she said. "I did not want you to see me like this." Elias shook his head. "Then I would have missed the chance to prove that I care. That would have been worse." She looked into the fire, her eyes distant. "You make it sound easy." "It is not easy," he said, "but it is worth it." Lena leaned back against the chair, the blanket still around her. The flames painted her face in shades of gold and shadow. "You know," she said softly, "I thought you were the one who needed saving." "Maybe we both did," he replied. They sat together without speaking for a long time. The world outside had faded to darkness, but the small house by the lake glowed with life. For Elias, the warmth that filled the room no longer felt borrowed. It felt shared. As the fire burned low, Lena's eyes began to close. Exhaustion overtook her, and her head tilted slightly to the side. Elias moved quietly, placing a small pillow behind her. She murmured something he could not make out, a half-formed word lost to sleep. He sat across from her, watching the rise and fall of her breathing, the peace that had finally settled on her face. For years, he had believed that pain was something to be endured alone. But seeing her there, asleep by his fire, he realized that perhaps the bravest act of all was to let another person stay. Outside, the wind softened, and the rain turned into a whisper. Inside, 2 people each carrying their own storm found a moment of stillness. Elias looked at the scarf on the chair beside him, the same one she had once left behind, and smiled. This time, he would make sure she took it back, because he finally understood what it meant to give warmth, not just receive it. The morning light spilled gently across the living room, stretching over the floorboards and catching the faint smoke still rising from the fireplace. Elias had fallen asleep in the chair some time before dawn, his head tilted slightly, the soft crackle of dying embers the last sound he remembered. When he opened his eyes, Lena was still there, curled beneath the blanket he had given her. The early sunlight painted her face in a quiet glow. For a long moment, he simply watched her breathe. There was a softness in the air he did not want to disturb. Eventually, her eyes fluttered open. She blinked once, confused, then smiled faintly when she saw him. "I must have fallen asleep," she said, her voice still rough from rest. Elias nodded. "You needed it." She sat up slowly, brushing her hair back. I am sorry for taking over your chair. He shook his head. It is fine. You made the house feel alive. The comment hung in the air longer than he expected. Lena looked away, a quiet blush coloring her cheeks. You know, she said softly, I have not slept through the night in months. I guess I finally felt safe enough. Elias smiled, but his voice came out lower. That means more than you know. He walked to the kitchen and returned with 2 mugs of coffee. The smell filled the room, earthy and familiar. Here, he said. No tea this morning. You need something stronger. She accepted it with a small laugh. You sound like a doctor again. Maybe I am remembering how to be one, he said, though you have been the one doing the healing lately. They drank in silence for a while, listening to the rainwater dripping from the roof. Outside, the world was fresh and clean. Inside, the quiet was steady, comfortable. When Lena finally spoke again, her tone was thoughtful. You never told me why you left the hospital. Elias froze. The question was gentle, but it reached straight to the scar beneath his calm. He stared into his coffee, watching the faint steam twist upward like a ghost. There was a boy, he said finally. He was 12, injured during an evacuation. I did everything I could, but it was not enough. After that, I could not walk into a room without hearing his mother's voice. Lena listened quietly, her eyes steady. You blame yourself. I was the one who made the decision, he said. One life for another. I chose wrong. She shook her head. You chose to try. That is what matters. We are not gods, Elias. We do what we can with the hands we have. Her words struck something deep inside him. For years, he had repeated the same sentence in his head. I failed. Hearing her say otherwise felt like a thread snapping loose, like a wound finally being cleaned. He looked up, meeting her gaze. You sound like someone who has seen loss, too. Lena nodded. My mother. When I was 16, she was sick for a long time. That is why I became a nurse. I promised her I would not let anyone else feel alone like she did. Their stories hung in the air, woven together by shared silence. It was not the silence of emptiness anymore, it was understanding. Elias moved closer to the fireplace and added another log. The flame caught quickly, bright and sure. Strange, he said. It feels easier to breathe when I speak about it. That is how healing works, she said. It happens slowly, then all at once. He turned back to her, the light from the fire reflecting in his eyes. You really believe people can come back from anything? I believe they can if they want to, she replied. Sometimes all it takes is someone willing to stand beside them while they remember how. Elias felt something shift inside his chest, something small, but alive. Then maybe that is what you have been doing, he said quietly. Lena smiled. And maybe you have been doing the same for me. The air between them grew still again, filled only by the soft hum of the fire. The weight of their words did not need explanation. It lived in the space between glances, in the quiet recognition that both of them had been walking the same road, just from opposite ends. After a while, Lena stood, folding the blanket carefully. I should go check on my father. He will be discharged soon. Elias nodded, though he felt the faint ache of disappointment. Of course. Tell him I hope he recovers quickly. She placed the folded blanket on the chair, then looked at him with a half smile. Thank you for the warmth, she said. He stepped closer, close enough for the scent of her hair to mingle with the smoke of the fire. Anytime, he said, you know where to find it. For a heartbeat, she did not move. Then she reached out, touching his healed hand. The contact was brief, gentle, but filled with meaning. You really are healing, she whispered. He glanced down at their joined hands. So are you. She gave one last smile before turning toward the door. The morning light framed her silhouette as she stepped outside, the air still cool but bright with promise. Elias watched until she disappeared along the gravel path. Then he turned back toward the fireplace, the echo of her presence still alive in the room. He placed his hand over the faint scar, feeling the steady beat beneath it. For the first time in years, it did not hurt to remember. Instead, it felt like gratitude, like warmth, that had finally found its way home. A full week passed before Elias saw Lena again. The weather had turned colder, the wind carrying the sharp scent of winter across the lake. Frost gathered on the windows each morning, and the fire became his daily companion. He found himself listening for the sound of footsteps outside his door, the light knock that had once broken his loneliness. But the days slipped by in quiet repetition, and she did not come. He tried to tell himself she needed time with her father. He told himself that patience was part of healing. Yet every evening, when the fire began to fade, he caught himself glancing toward the door, expecting it to open. One evening, as the light dimmed and the snow began to fall, he saw movement outside the window. A small figure walked along the path, shoulders hunched against the cold. When the knock finally came, Elias was already standing there, hand on the door handle. Lena stepped inside, her cheeks flushed red, her breath clouding in the air. "I should have come sooner," she said softly. "I wanted to, but the days kept running away from me." He took her coat gently, hanging it near the fire. "You are here now. That is all that matters." She smiled, though her eyes held a weariness that worried him. "My father is home," she said. "He is recovering well, but it has been hard. The house feels heavy." Elias poured tea for both of them. "Sometimes caring for others takes more strength than anyone realizes," he said. Lena nodded, her hands wrapped around the warm cup. "There are nights I just sit beside him and listen to him breathe. I am afraid that if I close my eyes, I might lose him again." Her words cut through the quiet. Elias understood that fear too well. "You cannot guard every moment," he said softly. "But you can fill the ones you have with kindness. That is what keeps them alive inside you." Lena looked at him, her expression softening. "You sound like the doctor I imagined you were before you left the hospital." "Maybe I am remembering," he said. "Not everything I lost is gone." The fire crackled between them. For a long while, neither spoke. Then Lena reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. "I brought you something," she said. Inside was a photograph. It showed a community center, painted white with blue shutters, and a group of people standing in front of it smiling, waving. "What is this?" Elias asked. "Thomas's place," she said. "It is a small rehabilitation clinic on the edge of town. We are opening a new wing for trauma patients. They need someone to lead the recovery team." Elias stared at the picture. The name sounded familiar. "Thomas," he murmured. "That was my patient's name." Lena nodded. "I know. That is why I thought of you. I told them about you, about your experience, your compassion. They would be lucky to have you." He looked at her, speechless for a moment. "You think I could go back?" "I do not think," she said gently. "I know." The words filled the room with a new kind of silence, the kind that follows hope. Elias turned the photo over in his hands. "It has been 5 years," he said. 5 years since I walked away." "Then maybe it is time to walk back," she replied. Elias sat down, still staring at the image. The faces in the picture looked full of life, full of second chances. A part of him long buried stirred again, the part that wanted to make a difference, to heal. "I am not sure if I remember how," he said. Lena moved closer, resting her hand lightly on his arm. "You never forgot. You just stopped believing it mattered." He looked into her eyes and saw no pity there, only faith. The kind of faith that could rebuild someone piece by piece. The fire burned low, and the wind howled outside, rattling the windows. Yet inside, the warmth grew stronger, brighter. Elias felt something rise inside him that had been missing for too long purpose. He placed the photograph on the mantel, beside the old scarf and the matches. "If I go," he said quietly, "it will not be because I want to escape the past. It will be because I finally know what to do with it." Lena smiled, her eyes shining. "That is exactly why they need you." They sat together as the snow fell outside, the world soft and white. Time slowed to the rhythm of their breaths. Eventually, Lena leaned back, watching the fire. "I used to think strength meant standing alone," she said. "Now I see it means standing with someone who understands." Elias looked at her, his voice low. "Then maybe we can both learn to stand together." She met his gaze and nodded. "Maybe we already are." Outside, the snow deepened, wrapping the world in silence. Inside, 2 souls, one rediscovering purpose, the other learning to let go, sat side by side in the glow of a single fire. For the first time in a long while, Elias did not feel the ache of waiting. He felt something else instead, hope, steady and alive, burning quietly in the space between them. The next morning arrived, wrapped in pale winter light. Elias stood at the window, holding the photograph Lena had given him. The faces in it seemed to speak to him, quietly reminding him that healing did not belong to the past. It could still live in the present. The wind outside had settled, the lake frozen at its edges, glimmering like glass. He decided to drive into town. It had been years since he felt a reason to go anywhere with purpose. The road curved through pine trees, dusted with snow, and sunlight filtered through in narrow streams. When he reached the small building marked Thomas's place, his hands tightened on the steering wheel. The clinic was modest but full of life. A few people stood near the entrance, shoveling snow, their laughter echoing through the crisp air. Elias stepped out, the cold biting his cheeks. Inside, warmth greeted him immediately, the smell of coffee, the hum of quiet voices, the sound of someone tuning a guitar in the therapy room. A woman at the front desk looked up. "Good morning. Can I help you?" He nodded. "My name is Elias Hart. I was told there might be a position available." Her expression brightened. "You must be the doctor Lena mentioned. She said you might come by." Elias felt something stir in his chest. "So she really did talk about me," he said, almost smiling. "She did," the woman replied. "She said you are the kind of man who helps people remember they are still worth saving." Those words stayed with him long after he left the front desk. He walked through the hallways, past open doors that revealed group sessions, art therapy, and quiet conversations. Everything pulsed with life, with small acts of courage. He stopped in front of a mural painted across the far wall, hands reaching upward toward a sunrise. Below it, in faded letters, were the words, "Healing begins when we stop hiding." He stood there for a long time, feeling the truth of it. Later that afternoon, Lena arrived. She looked surprised when she saw him standing in the hallway. "You came?" she said, a smile spreading slowly across her face. "I had to see it for myself," Elias said. "You were right. This place feels alive." She walked beside him through the corridor. "The people here have been through a lot," she said. "They need someone who understands that healing is not just medicine. It is memory, forgiveness, and sometimes a hand that does not let go." Elias nodded. "I know that now." They stopped at the end of the hallway, where the mural caught the afternoon sunday. The colors looked warmer, almost glowing. Lena turned to him. "So, will you stay?" He hesitated, not out of fear, but out of awe. For the first time, the answer felt simple. "Yes," he said. "I think it is time." Lena smiled, and in that moment, everything that had felt heavy between them lifted. The silence that had once been cold now felt full of meaning. As they stood there, side by side, the sunlight fell across their faces, the warmth cutting through the chill that winter had left behind. Elias took a slow breath, feeling the weight of 5 years begin to ease from his shoulders. He looked at her and said quietly, "You were right from the start. The fire changes everything." Lena looked back at him, her eyes soft. "Then promise me you will keep it burning." "I will," he said. "Not just here, everywhere it is needed." Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the town in a layer of quiet light. Inside Thomas's place, a new chapter began, not just for the patients, but for the man who had finally remembered what it meant to heal. Weeks passed, and life at Thomas's place settled into a rhythm that felt both new and strangely familiar. Elias found himself waking each morning before dawn, driving through the quiet streets as the town slept beneath its blanket of snow. By the time he arrived at the clinic, the first hints of light were brushing the horizon, and the building glowed like a lantern in the cold. The work came naturally, as if his hands had been waiting for this. He guided patients through simple exercises, taught them to breathe through the tremors, and listened when their words faltered. The sound of gratitude, laughter, and tears began to fill the spaces that had once been silent. Every evening, when he left, he felt the kind of exhaustion that carried peace rather than emptiness. Lena visited often. She worked part-time at the clinic now, helping organize the new trauma support wing. Whenever she entered a room, it felt like the air shifted, as if something brighter had been invited in. They shared quiet lunches, long conversations about recovery, and moments that hung just on the edge of something unspoken. One afternoon, after a long day of sessions, Elias found Lena sitting on the porch outside the clinic. The sun was beginning to set, turning the sky into shades of orange and rose. She held a cup of tea between her hands, steam rising in soft spirals. He sat beside her without speaking. For a while, they watched the light fade behind the hills. The snow was melting slowly now, the air touched with the promise of spring. Lena broke the silence first. "Do you ever think about how strange it is," she said, "that two broken paths can cross and somehow make something whole?" Elias smiled, the corners of his eyes creasing. "Every day. I used to believe that broken meant finished. Now I think it just means ready for something new." She nodded, her eyes on the horizon. My father asks about you, she said with a small laugh. He calls you the quiet doctor who fixed his daughter without even trying. Elias chuckled softly. Then you can tell him it was mutual. For a moment, neither spoke. The air was cool, but the sun's warmth lingered against their faces. A group of children from the rehabilitation program played nearby, their laughter echoing through the yard. It felt like life was breathing again, gently, patiently. Lena turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. Do you ever regret it? Walking away all those years ago? Elias thought for a moment. I did, he said honestly. But if I had not, I would never have learned what I needed to come back. I would not have met you. Her gaze softened. You make it sound as if everything had to fall apart first. Sometimes it does, he replied. You cannot rebuild something until you understand what it was meant to hold. A quiet breeze passed between them. The scent of pine mixed with the fading smoke from the fireplace inside. The world felt still, suspended between day and night. Lena took a slow breath. You know, she said, you never told me what made you light that fireplace again. Elias looked at her, a hint of warmth in his eyes. You did, he said simply. You showed me that some fires do not burn to destroy. They burn to remind us that we are still alive. Her lips curved into a soft smile, one that carried both gratitude and understanding. Then keep that fire, Elias. Do not let it go out. I will not, he said quietly, not as long as there is someone to share the warmth with. Oh, they sat together until the sun slipped below the horizon and the world turned silver. The porch light flickered on, casting a soft glow around them. It was not grand, not dramatic. It was simple, human, and real. In that moment, neither of them needed to say what they already knew, that healing had brought them together, and love had quietly taken its place beside it. Spring arrived quietly, melting away the last traces of winter around the lake. The snow receded into the earth, and in its place, small green shoots began to rise. The air carried the scent of wet soil and pine, and sunlight spilled freely through the windows of Thomas's place. For Elias, the world no longer felt like something distant to be observed. It felt like something he belonged to again. Every morning began with the same sound, the soft hum of life returning. Patients chatting in the hallways, music drifting from a therapy room, the low crackle of the fireplace in the corner. That fire had never gone out since the day he lit it again. It had become a symbol for the place, and for him. One afternoon, as the day drew to a close, Lena walked into his office carrying a stack of papers. Her hair caught the sunlight, turning gold at the edges. The new wing opens next week, she said, setting the files down with a small smile. You should see the sign. They named it after you. Elias looked up, surprised. After me? She nodded. The heart recovery wing. For the man who reminded us that healing is not just medicine, it is kindness. He was quiet for a moment, his throat tightening. I do not deserve that, he said softly. Yes, Lena replied, her voice firm but warm. You do. The silence that followed was filled with meaning. He stood and walked to the window, watching the reflection of the sun rippling across the lake. You know, he said after a while, I used to think I had nothing left to give. But somehow, every time I helped someone else find their way back, I found a piece of myself too. Lena moved closer. That is what healing does. It gives back what the pain once took. He turned toward her, and in her eyes he saw everything that had changed: trust, light, and the quiet understanding that had grown between them. You taught me that warmth is not something we chase, he said. It is something we share. She smiled. Then promise me we will keep sharing it. I promise, he said. Outside, the sound of laughter carried through the open window. The patients were planting flowers by the fence, their voices blending with the wind. The sky stretched wide and blue above them, full of new beginnings. Elias reached for Lena's hand. It fit naturally in his, steady and warm. Together they stood watching the sun sink behind the hills, the firelight from the common room flickering in the reflection of the glass. For the first time in years, Elias did not think about the past or the scars it left behind. He thought about the life that was still ahead, the people, the warmth, the love that had found its way back to him. The story ended not with silence, but with the soft, steady sound of a heartbeat his own, strong and alive again. Because sometimes, the greatest healing begins the moment you decide to let someone stay.